I am back with the second part of the carbon cycle videos. We did a little bit of chemistry background. If you haven't already watched that video where I did this, you need to watch that first. So this is the piece that you've cut out that gives you some reading about the carbon cycle. And I want to walk through this with you, just make sure that you know what these terms mean and how to pronounce them. So I'm going to zoom in here, right here. I want to look at these two different terms. You have geological and biological. Now let's first look at the two meanings here. Geo means earth or related to the earth, and bio means related to life. So on the left we're looking at the earth carbon cycle, and on the right we're looking at the life carbon cycle. The left is talking about things that take a very long time to occur. Biological things take very short times to occur. So on the left, think long term, many years. And on the right, some of these are happening in seconds, long term and short term. So the first thing that we're looking at with long-term factors under the Earth carbon cycle, there are two things here. We have weather, which we're all familiar with weather, and dissolution. When you think about dissolution, think of the word dissolve. They're in the same family. So let's see what this process is talking about. What does weather and dissolving have to do with the carbon cycle? Carbonic acid forms when carbon dioxide, CO2, and water react. Weak acid rain falls as precipitation, and it reacts with minerals and dissolves them. So this particular process involves acid that forms when carbon dioxide and water come together. So carbon dioxide, water come together, and that carbonic acid is the product of that coming together. That accumulates in the clouds, that causes acid rain to fall as precipitation. So there's the weather. The dissolution comes when that acid rain reacts with minerals in the earth and breaks them down or dissolves them. Okay, another thing that happens in this long-term earth carbon cycle is the precipitation of minerals. Precipitation of minerals. So those dissolved minerals are carried in surface water to the ocean. Shells settle to the ocean floor and eventually form limestone. So this is not a bad process. This is a process that occurs in nature and actually benefits nature. It's basically the movement of dissolved minerals to the ocean. Two more terms: burial, which you probably have heard of, and subduction. Now when you think of sub, think of below or under. Anytime you're seeing sub, think of below. So burial, we know what that is. But what is subduction? It says carbon-bearing sediment, and this is a bad error. That should be this word bearing, not that one. Carbon-bearing sediment is continually being deposited on the seafloor. Plate tectonics. Now this is a word that you need, or a term that you need to know. Plate tectonics is the movement of those massive plates on the Earth's surface. If you think about the whole globe as being broken into these massive plates of rock, plates are constantly moving, and they're pushing and they're pulling and they're rubbing against each other. So that process of plate tectonics causes denser layers to submerge in a process called subduction. And this person has some serious grammar errors. I did not write this, I promise. I bought this, but this is not okay. That should say plate tectonics causes denser layers to submerge in a process called subduction. So what's happening, the movement of plates is pushing those layers deeper and deeper under the ocean floor. That is the process of subduction. You know what a volcano is, so those volcanic eruptions help with this process, this carbon process. Seafloor carbon is pushed deeper into the earth and eventually melts. So subduction forces that carbon deeper and deeper. Volcanoes, hot springs, and tectonic uplift all release that carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. So subduction is pushing that carbon deeper and deeper, and then the volcanoes blow it back out into the atmosphere. So that's a cycle of its own right there. Those first 4 steps are a cycle of carbon moving through the environment. Combustion. This is another way that carbon dioxide or carbon moves through the air. Rapid chemical combination of a substance with oxygen involving the production of heat, light, and the release of carbon dioxide. Combustion is basically burning. When you light something on fire or there is something ignites, that is combustion. So there is a rapid chemical change when oxygen encounters that combustion. You know that oxygen feeds fires. The first thing you want to do if something catches on fire is cut the oxygen supply. You never want to smoke around an oxygen tank because oxygen feeds combustion. And it produces heat. We know that fire is hot. Light, fire is bright. And carbon dioxide is a byproduct of combustion. So these are just some processes that occur in geology that you need to know about. You don't need to memorize it. I just want you to have heard of those things before and sort of think through those things. So let's look at the processes that are related to life in the carbon cycle. The first one of them is so important. It is the process of photosynthesis. Photo means light, and synthesis means to create or to make. In photosynthesis, this is a process in which green plants use solar energy or energy from the sun to turn atmospheric carbon dioxide into carbohydrates. Now let me just remind you of that little diagram. Remember this tree, which is a green plant, and that green plant is using carbon dioxide because that green plant needs to take that carbon dioxide and make it into sugar. It's trying to use that chemical to create food for itself. And as a byproduct of that process, oxygen is released. Now something has to be in place to convert that oxygen back to carbon dioxide, and that's where people come in, or animals. So the oxygen is breathed by the person breathes out carbon dioxide, but the photosynthesis is taking place in this green plant. Okay. respiration. You're seeing that taking place in this picture as well. John is breathing. That's respiration. Respiration is the reverse process of photosynthesis, where carbon dioxide is released back into the atmosphere during that breathing process. For example, I'm not sure what that means. That's strangely out of place to me, but it's true. Plants break down sugar, animals break down sugar. Both are, in a way, they're breathing. They're giving off gases. So respiration and photosynthesis are opposite processes. Decomposition. You've probably heard of this one. Decomposing is the breaking down of dead things, and that puts carbon into the soil. As dead plants and animal matter decompose, they're releasing the carbon into the soil. It is broken down during decay, and carbon dioxide is released back into the atmosphere. So decomposition is another way that carbon dioxide is entering the atmosphere. This process you may not have heard of. This is diffusion. You may have heard this when you, in a different context, if you have two people who are very angry and a third person comes in to diffuse the situation, that's the same word. It's sort of a dispersion or a breaking down, a separating of, in that scenario, anger or emotions. But if you're talking about weather processes or life processes, diffusion is where carbon is absorbed and released, where the ocean surface meets the air. So where the top of the ocean water contacts air, diffusion occurs. Those particles of water are being dispersed or spread out into the atmosphere. And that's another way that carbon is released into the air. This is a lot of complicated stuff. When I was in school, I think we spent a whole week studying the carbon cycle, and I'm giving you this in 30 minutes. So there's a lot here. There really is. The test will give you reading material or a diagram to look at. They're not going to ask you to just recite this information. So don't panic about trying to commit all this to memory. I just want you to have a background knowledge of this topic. I am going to stop this video and I'll start another one, but we'll look at this diagram. For me, this is a much easier thing to understand than all of this, but I wanted to give it to you both ways just in case. And you can go ahead and glue this picture, the one that we just looked at, you can glue that down on page 61 if you want to go ahead and do that. Just stick this piece down completely onto page 61. And I'll see you in the next clip for the final piece of this lesson.